Hey everyone, welcome to Impact Marketer. Today's guest is founder of Kenji ROI, an Amazon listing optimization agency, creator and host of the Danny Carlson podcast, where he interviews location-independent business owners, as well as the Actualize Freedom podcast, where he interviews millionaire e-commerce sellers. Producing more than 1,200 Amazon listings through his agency, being able to create a fully remote service agency to be able to live in Bali, publishing over 60 podcast episodes when the industry standard is to not make it past 10, having to truly overcome limiting beliefs, insecurities, and mental energy issues to get to where he is today. He's not only built his agency to $40K per month in revenue, but also has helped his first coaching client reach $10K per month with their service agency. Going from a speed demon that survived the downhill skateboard crash involving 5 cars, 2 of them being police cars, to a successful entrepreneur that's focused his work on serving aspiring agency owners. Please help me in welcoming Danny Carlson.
Awesome, man. Love that intro. It makes me sound like I know what I'm doing or something.
I hope so. That's the whole point. It's all a facade. Cool, man. So happy to have you on, Danny.
What's up, guys? Good to be here.
Yeah, man. So, I usually don't ask this question, but you have a very unique and niche business. So tell me a little bit about your business, like how you got started. And of course, what is it for someone who's not in the Amazon space?
Yeah, so my business is Kenji ROI, and we are basically a creative and marketing agency for brands to sell on Amazon. So for any e-commerce brand selling on Amazon, we produce their Amazon listings all the way from the ground up, including product photography, video, A+ content, which is graphics, and the copywriting, keyword optimizations. And then on the marketing side, we manage their Amazon ads. So it is only very specifically all related to the Amazon platform. And I started this actually because I got started selling on Amazon myself back in 2016. And Amazon or e-commerce businesses in general are very cash flow intensive. So I wasn't able to pay myself very much money out of that business in the beginning. And it doesn't make sense to extract money from the company. It makes sense you got to be reinvesting as much as possible. So through that, I just took my skills that I learned on setting up my own products and the copywriting, and I just started only with copywriting, just for mostly my friends, people who I knew in the Amazon space that needed someone to help them with the copywriting. And from there, I had built up my Amazon account to pretty good size by that point, and then I had got it suspended. So Amazon held on to one of my payments for 90 days, and I was sitting there freaking out, like, what am I going to do for income? It's like, I don't know if I'm even going to get this account back and all this stuff. So I, at that point, had to make a decision. Am I going to quit this whole thing that I worked so hard to create and go back to working carpentry out in the pouring rain? Or am I going to double down on my agency, which it was just me freelancing at the time, and really turn that into full-time income and a full-time business? So through that big Amazon account suspension, that scary time, I just really doubled down and turned that freelance gig into an agency.
Wow. So that was like trial by fire. You had to make it work.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I meet a lot of people out here in Bali, especially, that went through an exact similar thing. Even worse, a lot of them were hundreds of thousands or over $1 million in debt from a previous business failure. And so if they didn't become very successful afterwards, then there's no way they'd be able to pay off their debt. It's the only way. Like, you can't just get yourself $1 million in debt and then go work some 9-to-5 job and pay off that debt. You'll be in debt for the rest of your life. You have to create another business that is going to generate a certain amount of income. That's your only way.
So you've seen success stories after success stories from scenarios like that in Bali?
Yeah, I've met a lot of entrepreneurs that was their situation, and it makes a lot of sense because it is similar to my situation too. Is kind of trial by fire, right? I was put in a situation where I had to make it work, and I made it work. It's a great motivator, and it makes a lot of sense that if you do get yourself in one of those situations, then you're going to persevere. When things get really hard, you're going to work harder than you normally would, because you know that that's your only option. You're not 1 foot in, 1 foot out. If you can go all in on that, you're forced to go all in on that. So there's no hesitations.
During that time, what sacrifices did you have to make? Like, what kind of lifestyle were you living?
I was working ridiculous hours. Minimum 10-hour day was kind of like a chill day for me. 12-hour days quite often. And I was just hitting burnout over and over again. I was working, I was kind of during the same period going through that transition where I was partying less and drinking less and just becoming more serious about my health. So I was also quite socially isolated during that time, but really just obsessively putting in the work, right? It was not an easy period for me, and I'm very glad I'm past that period in the business, but it was grind time for sure.
And how long did it take you to get out of there?
It's a good question. It was more of a gradual kind of thing. I'd say I probably grinded it out for a solid 8 months before I started getting some really good traction of like where I could start to hire some more team members to help me out with a lot of the other stuff. And I'd figured out some systems that made things more repeatable, and was just getting a more consistent flow of inbound leads for the business and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. So, what was that system that created like a predictable lead flow for your business?
One of the biggest ones was the podcast. So I started the Actualize Freedom podcast, actually not too far after I started my agency. And I guess actually it might have been like a full year after I started. And it just gained a lot of credibility with the listeners of the podcast, even though it was a very small amount of listeners in the beginning. But more so than that, it allowed me to create relationships with the guests that I had on the podcast and set them up as an affiliate or do some kind of guest posting or cross-posted content with them to their audience. And so that was a big driver in the beginning.
Wow, that's a great point. Yeah, I'm starting those podcasts for authority and credibility, but yeah, the partnerships that come from the relationships, that's a huge play for sure. And
yeah, absolutely. And that's still one of our biggest strategies for growth with the agency and then also my personal brand.
So do you run any paid traffic?
We do run retargeting ads, some basic retargeting, but we don't run any cold paid traffic.
Why not?
It's very difficult to target Amazon sellers using Facebook ads or other methods. We've tried it in the past with not very good results. We will occasionally do, like we do have some like fancier tactics that we try occasionally, but there's a problem in when you have a service-based agency, it's not as scalable as something like a software company or an info product business where, you can theoretically sell 1 or 1,000 of something with very marginal increase in team resources. An agency, you can only take on a certain amount of business, and so there's no point in scaling up your marketing. So we have run into that many times over the past 3 years of just, we are at full capacity with who we can serve, so there's no point in scaling up our marketing.
It's definitely a good problem to have.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you measure being at capacity?
Well, now we have some better systems in place where we can clearly see, like we know that we can reliably produce a certain amount of photo packages per week, a certain amount of videos per week, and everything like that. And we can take a look at, how many we have in our pipeline, and then from that point, any new customers that are coming in, we have to be transparent with them, being like, okay, like we actually are going to have another 2-week delay on these if you were to order right now. So we just have like spreadsheets, and in our task management software, we have a few filters where we can clearly see, are we at capacity for this week, or how many weeks out would we be to produce this for our clients.
Got it. Yeah. And I ask because a measurement I've seen used and I'm planning to use is like tracking how on time your delivery or fulfillment is. So if everything's on track or early, you can probably fulfill more customers. And if it's late, then you probably have an issue with fulfillments and capacity.
Yeah, that's something that, like, as you get more experience, as you and your team get more experience. It's not only about you, but also like if there's a new team member, you don't know what they can produce reliably until you've seen them work for, a couple months, and you've tracked week by week how much they produce each week. You know what's a good week and a bad week for them. Then you can start to really know your numbers and know how much you can take on each week and everything.
Mm-hmm. And I want to quickly go back to, I guess, your motivations of starting your agency. Like, why did you start your own business in the first place? That doesn't seem to be clear.
For me, it was more out of an urge for freedom. So I started off in carpentry for 6 years, from when I was like 17 or 16 years old or something like that. And it was immediately allowed me to make a decent amount of money, like a lot more than my peers at the time. It was like a 19-year-old making $25 an hour or something like that. That feels pretty good, right? When all your friends have student loan debt or are working for $12 an hour somewhere. But that there's a very low ceiling to being a carpenter, right? Like the most I could possibly hope for is just work my way up and have my own company, and maybe I'd be making a couple $100,000 a year after working for 20-year career and really investing in my own tools and all that kind of stuff. Which maybe that sounds okay, but for how hard you're working and the type of work, it's way underpaid in my opinion. When you can start your own business and have a lot more freedom of time and location and actually be doing something much more fulfilling, and then the ceiling on that is it's unlimited, right? So my motivation was more out of a dissatisfaction with my current career.
And now that you've achieved, I would say, like, at least in part, most of that goal, how does that affect your drive?
So I've gone through periods where I had no drive, basically, if like I achieved whatever monetary and other kind of goals I had for the agency. And I went through periods of just like not really working very much and just like a lot of lethargy. I couldn't force myself to do the things that I planned out to do in the business that week. But I've learned that setting my goals and intentions each week just based on a really clear and compelling vision that I have is the way to keep myself on track for that. So I spend a lot of time journaling and really visualizing what it is that I want to manifest in my life, right? Like what kind of lifestyle, whether that's traveling or living in a certain place or having a nicer motorcycle or something like that. I just visualize exactly what that is, and then I know exactly how much money it's going to take to get there. And then I reverse engineer, what kind of business can produce that kind of money, and then actually the smaller action items from there. So spending enough time really detailing it out to that degree makes it a lot easier to stay motivated, because you know that whatever you're working on is going to take you towards that compelling vision. And when I say this compelling vision too, I'm like actually visualizing and feeling this vision, right? So it like feels very real. It's not just like something I wrote down once and forget about. It's something I review every single morning and get myself feeling what it's going to be like to have this, right? And as long as I do this whole scenario, it becomes much easier to stay motivated and stay in front of the computer and do the things that I know I need to do to get to that vision that I have for myself.
Do you think you're able to convince yourself of this compelling vision because of the confidence that you've built up through repeated success?
That certainly helps, but it's not a prerequisite. So I've been doing this kind of stuff for, back when I was making like barely enough money to pay my rent. And it still completely works as long as you can feel and visualize that compelling vision and like literally have that feeling as if you'd already achieved what it is you want to achieve, just basic manifestation theory, then it will have the same effect. It does make it easier if you do have confidence and everything like that, but you can achieve the same thing through visualization if you practice it consistently and put in the mental effort needed to actually like sit in those visualizations.
And there's an immense amount of work that also goes into that, right? It's not just visualization.
You mean like actually taking actions to realize the visualization?
Yeah,
absolutely. But I look at that as an interesting way. So, of course, you need action, but taking action without the visualization is incredibly tricky. The visualization makes taking the action much easier because it combats a lot of the uncertainty and the doubt. It is almost impossible to take the actions that you need to take if you're uncertain or you're like very heavily doubting that they're actually going to work or they're actually going to get you the result that you want to get, or you doubt that you can actually do it. All these things. I'm sure you guys have been in situations where you know exactly what it is you need to do to get X result, but you can't force yourself to do it for whatever reason, right? And visualization, in my experience, is the key to getting past that.
Mm-hmm. And how often do you do these mental check-ins? As much as you need?
I do it every morning. I meditate for 20 minutes, and part of that meditation is this visualizations, and then I spend about another 10 minutes after that just have a document where I have like all these things really laid out and spelled out, kind of like affirmations, and then I spend some time visualizing, going through that document as well.
So what's the step-by-step process for visualization? Just that segment of your meditation alone?
So in my meditation, I do a 20-minute meditation every day, and it goes a little something like this. So the first 5 minutes, I will just drop into the meditation, just focus on my breathing and just get into that meditative state. And then the second 5 minutes, I will visualize an event that happened in my past, something that I can really drop into a zone of gratitude, something that just was a really peak state. And I literally tried to feel that exact same feeling of that peak state. Sometimes it'll be me when I was longboarding down the French Alps, and I just was in this crazy peak zone of adrenaline and flow. And that's just, I try to channel that and feel that. And then for the third 5 minutes, I try to channel the same feeling, but apply it to something that I want to manifest, something in the future that I still have not actually achieved, but I'm visualizing and seeing that, but with the same emotional charge of that emotional peak state. And then the fourth 5 minutes, I just leave my brain open to whatever comes in there. And typically it will have direct correlation to something that I'm trying to achieve. That's when I get like really good ideas, like kind of downloads just popping into the brain that are good ideas to help me achieve whatever it is I'm focusing my mind on.
Yeah, those are great tips, man. Because I've definitely struggled with the visualization part myself. I think my logic kind of gets in the way and starts to battle it. On okay, how is thinking about this going to make it happen? But I know this can be explained like logically and neurologically as well. So yeah, that's been something I definitely struggled with. You've made this transition into your personal brand. Like why that move? And how does that tie back into your business?
So the agency is definitely a bit of a grind. And for me, I'm pretty happy with where the agency is right now. And rather than grow the agency to the next level, I would prefer to focus my energy on something that I get a little bit more fulfillment out of than, just grow into a much larger agency. That doesn't really appeal to me. So what does appeal to me more is actually helping people on more of a personal level. So that's what my personal brand is built around, because I believe that the best first business for anyone to start is a service-based digital agency, because it doesn't take any financial investment. It is a safe container to learn the art of business and make mistakes without, wasting a giant capital investment or a loan or, money on a credit card or something like that. It doesn't require any of that risk. It's a safe container to be your first business and make it profitable from the beginning. And so helping people go through that process, and also mental challenges that come up through this process, because, a business, especially your first one, is just a mirror of all your insecurities and your self-doubts and your limiting beliefs. That it is even more so a personal development process than it is just like a learning the actual tactical business side of things. So I get a lot more fulfillment out of helping people through that whole process than I do helping Amazon companies sell a few $100,000 extra, $1 million extra that year on Amazon. That's great, and that certainly has a place in the value market, but I personally get a lot more fulfillment out of the personal brand side of things.
Got it. So that's great. And what would you tell someone right now who has been thinking about starting a business, but they have no idea where to start, right? So you gave them this great idea, digital service agency. What are the next 5 steps to actually go down that path?
So I always recommend to my students that you should start with skills that you already have. There's no point in starting from scratch. Like, Tai Lopez tells people, like, go start a Facebook ads agency. And most of those people they've never ran a Facebook ad in their entire lives. So, like, why would you start an agency around something you have no clue how to do? You have to learn the skill of doing the thing. And then you also have to learn the skill of actually building the business and building up the team and the processes and all that. So makes a lot more sense to me to take a skill that you already have, and then you're learning the art of how do you turn that into a business and all the systems and processes and hiring team members and all that kind of stuff, right? So some examples. So one of my students is into photography, and so they are building their agency around product photography, right? Just like applying some business need for some skill they already have. A lot of people, they find that their current career is what they can build an agency around. So another one of my students is, he works for an e-commerce company that sells products on Amazon, so he really knows what he's doing on Amazon. And he is taking his skills to help other companies just based on his own skill sets he's already learned in his job. So that's step number 1. And the second part of that is really important is you're never going to be certain. You're never going to be even that certain that this is the right path. And in my opinion, you need to be somewhere around 70% sure, 65% sure of something. And that's the right time to go for it, because it's a big trap. Just like waiting until you have like clarity and certainty to go for something. That's very rare. I'll give you an example. Like, I actually had one of these moments of clarity, but what it took was a near-death experience of almost having a head-on collision with a motorcycle when I was longboarding on some remote island in the Philippines, right? So I was lucky enough to have one of these moments of clarity by near death. But for most people, these moments of clarity are not going to happen, right? You can wait years for them, you can wait decades for them, and you're just going to waste so much of your time and life energy just staying stagnant. So you just gotta be sure enough, and then just take the plunge and go for it, just knowing that that day of certainty is never actually going to show up.
And what's your thoughts on, like, how much money should you save up? Should you do it part-time? Like, how do you approach the finances part of it?
Yeah, doing it part-time, I think, is the best way to start. So you don't have to quit your full-time job. A lot of people assume that their current employer wouldn't be okay with them transitioning to part-time. And I assumed the same thing too back when I was a carpenter. That's just a very uncommon thing for carpenters to be part-time. It's like kind of unheard of. But then I read a part of Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek book where he outlines exactly how to negotiate these kind of part-time agreements with your boss. And lo and behold, I propositioned it to my boss, and he was totally okay with it. And there was zero resistance to me just working. What I set up was I was working 2 days a week instead of 5 days a week. So I had those extra 3 days per week to work in my business and everything. And, even before that, I was just doing it just like moonlighting, right? I was getting home from work after full-time work and just working on it for a few hours before I go to bed. So there's kind of a progression you can do of just like moonlighting, like after work. And then once it's taking more of your time, you can negotiate a part-time agreement. And then once that makes sense too, you can just quit your job entirely. It can be a progressive thing.
Walk me through how you got it from 5 days a week to 2 days a week. That's insane.
Yeah, so it was basically the way you frame it to your boss should be it should be beneficial for them. So number one, you need to be a top performer. If you are someone at work who just you are keeping a seat warm and you're not actually a valuable asset to your company, this becomes much harder to negotiate these kind of things. But assuming that if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are the type of person who is going to be one of the top performers at your workplace, then you have some leverage, right? It is very difficult for your boss to go find a good, solid replacement for you if you are a top performer. And if you frame this kind of thing as positive for your boss, being like, hey, like I'm working on this other project, but I still need to be working here part-time, and working on this other project is going to allow me to actually be more effective in my current position. Even though I'm working less per week, it's going to allow me to be more effective at my job. And for what you're paying me, I guarantee that I'm going to be bringing even more value to the table per hour that you're paying me here. So if you frame it in a way where it's them having you on part-time is going to be more profitable for them, and you actually can deliver on that promise, then it becomes much easier for your boss to say yes.
Very nice. And okay, so you did take a pay cut though, because you were working less, correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was paid by the hour, so hourly rate stayed the same, but it was working less hours. And I just calculated I only needed about 2 days per week to cover my living expenses, and so that just kept my living expenses good while the business was still in its infancy.
Nice. And you also mentioned, this rare moment of clarity that you did experience near death. What was that moment for you?
So that was longboard racing in the Philippines. I was really into downhill skateboard racing for about 10 years, and I was on this remote island in the Philippines during like a 2-month race circuit. I was out there, and so there's 4 of us going down. We're in the middle of a race heat, and I am out front. I actually have this on video. Sold it to a viral video company a couple of years ago, but there's a motorcycle coming up the track, and we're in the Philippines. They didn't do the best job of closing the racetrack, and so there's a motorcycle coming up, and he's just facing this wall of 4 longboarders taking up the whole road, so he has nowhere to go, and he had to make this crazy swerve right in front of me, just cutting off straight in front of me to get off the road, and I missed this motorcycle by about 2 inches, probably. Like I watched it in slow-mo a million times, and it was no more than 2-inch miss. I had to dive off my board to the right. And like you said in my intro, I've had collisions with a bunch of moving vehicles before and a bunch of really lucky situations, but this at that time was by far the closest one I've ever had. And it just forced me to really evaluate like the direction that I'm going in my life. Was that the life that I wanted to live? And the answer for me after that inquiry was, that I needed to really shift my life direction from being the longboarding van traveling bum to taking the next chapter and starting that business. And Ronnie, I have to wrap her up here. I have another meeting starting in a few minutes. So if there's a final question, then let's go into that one.
Yeah, man. Final question is, what would you tell your younger self?
My younger self, undoubtedly, it would be to put in the work to get your headspace straight. That is just, in the past couple of years of my life, I feel like I've developed mentally more than the previous 10 years. That's because I've been putting a lot of effort into developing my mental headspace, having a lot more clarity in my mental headspace, and being a lot more conscious of my thoughts in general and being able to direct it more. And that has allowed me to do so many things. Like it's for business and relationships and just like any area of my life that I want to architect in a certain way, it has allowed me to push past all of the mental barriers that get in the way of that much more effectively than at previous points in my life. Sometimes like these things would hold me back for years from achieving something that I wanted to achieve, and just gaining more control over that process. And I'm still very much working on this and have a long way to go on it, but the control that I've gained in the past couple of years is just like, is going to allow me to accelerate at twice the speed, 3 times the speed, who knows, but by far the most important thing.
Beautifully said, man. Where can people find out more about you?
You guys can check out dannycarlson.co, DANNY Carlson, CARLSON.co, or reach out to me on Instagram at danny.k.carlson. And yeah, if you guys are ever out in Bali, then hit me up with a DM and we can go do some coconuts on the beach or acro yoga and all that fun stuff.
Cool, man. Thanks so much for being on.
All right. Thanks, Ronnie.